Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
And essentially, we are the same.
Can't have government choosing winners or losers.
There are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is life illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan. Acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians, a Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology, look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller back with you, and we have a return guest. Very happy always to see Ken Martin, who's not only the chair of the Minnesota DFL, but he is also a chair nationally now of the National DFL, based on your track record, which has been outstanding.
Well, thank you.
And welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back here. I as we were talking about earlier, I think right after I was elected almost 8 years ago, one of the first media appearances I made was on your show, and I'm glad to be back here. I always enjoy talking to you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Now, you have a kind of a unique year this year in terms of Democrats. We have multiple candidates for multiple offices. All the constitutional officers are up for election again. We have people who came out of the convention with endorsements. We have people who came out of the woods without endorsements. We have well-known names who are running. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how have you been able to keep peace and have this above-board campaign?
Yeah, so first off, literally a few weeks ago, I led my staff at the DFL in the Serenity Prayer, because there's a lot of things we can control, but a lot of things that we can't, and we have to recognize that, and we have to just be at peace with what has happened. We can't control who's in the race, who's out of the race, all the different roller coaster of emotions that you can imagine. Ultimately, for us, we have to keep our eyes squarely focused on November 6th and make sure we're doing everything we can in these next 33 days until the primary to support our endorsed candidates. Now, you probably remember that cartoon Peanuts. There was this character called Schleprock, and wherever Schleprock went, there was this black cloud following around him, and I sort of feel like that this year, and I hope that black cloud goes away by the time we get to the election. But, this is a really challenging time for the Minnesota DFL here in this state. We have more on the ballot in terms of targeted races than any other state in the country, with 2 U.S. Senate races, an open governor's race, 4 nationally targeted congressional races, and a nationally targeted legislative chamber. We're really ground zero. We are the epicenter of the 2018 midterms. And so, we're really excited, anxious, nervous at the same time, and we got to take all that energy, focus on making sure we've got good plans. I always tell my staff, you've got to plan your work and then work your plan, and that's what we're up to right now. We've only got 118 some odd days left.
114, I think, to the election.
It's critical that we are implementing our plans, and we are executing at a very high level, and we're doing that right now.
So important. And well, you have very well-known names. One who came out of the convention, who certainly has been here many times, who is the endorsed candidate for governor. But we have 2 other candidates for governor, one a very well-known congressman, and the other our attorney general. Yep. So that the people really have an incredible choice in my mind, no matter which way they go of the three.
That's right.
But I guess the party has to stick with the endorsed
Well,
candidate.
look, I support the endorsement. I support the process. Our activists and party leaders throughout the state spent over a year and a half, almost 2 years, vetting these candidates through everything from bean feeds to big speeches to one-on-one meetings. And ultimately, our party leaders and activists, thousands of them throughout the state, made a decision and said that they wanted Aaron Murphy to carry our banner. But what's important is, and Aaron Murphy and Aaron May Quaid are a fantastic ticket, by the way, and they're exciting and inspiring and motivating thousands of people throughout Minnesota to their cause. And I'm convinced with the campaign, the politics of joy that they're running and the campaign they're running, that they're going to be successful on August 14th in the primary. But we've got great candidates. And as I remind...
Now, have the other candidates agreed not to run independent campaigns? If
Well, they can't
lose
at this point. So if they lose the primary, the way the Minnesota law works is that their race is over at that point. They couldn't file for the office as an independent.
Because it's confusing enough as it is now
Right.
going into the primary. We certainly didn't need that after the primary.
That's right. So, I'm convinced, if that primaries don't have to be a bad thing. As long as supporters of Congressman Walz and supporters of Attorney General Swanson realize that we are all in this together. We're all good Democrats. I feel blessed to have great candidates running for these offices. And while I'm disappointed that we have to have a primary, certainly I would have preferred to not have a primary. The reality is that a primary doesn't have to be a bad thing as long as we don't do the work of the Republicans for them. And what I mean is we need to keep our conversation focused on Tim Pawlenty and the Republicans and what they would do to this state if they won that governorship. And if we do that, I think we can come out on August 14th after the primary, be able to pivot all of our attention behind whoever wins and bring the party back together.
I think in some respects, the primary is also generating attention that might not have been there hadn't there been a primary.
Right.
And that's a good thing if it gets people active.
As long
If
as
the young
it does
people
that, right.
keep registering people, if we get the millennials back who sat on their hands 2 years ago, remembering that what happens here also affects us nationally.
Yes.
And what a mess. Now
Let's inspire them with positive messages. Let's not do the work of the Republicans for them by trashing other Democrats. That's one thing the party won't do. We will vigorously support our endorsed candidates. We will fight for them. We will invest resources into their campaigns and make sure that their message gets out. But we're not going to attack other Democrats. We've
and
got
I've
great
seen
Democrats.
above board commercials from, for instance, the candidates for governor.
Yep.
We also have now a contest for one of the U.S. Senate seats. And again, Richard Painter, a new name, who's been here a couple of times, has run a campaign where it's what I'm about, not denigrating the opponent. And as opposed to the phoenix that rose from the ashes, and I saw a commercial for Pawlenty, well, against Johnson yesterday by Pawlenty, that was really an offensive and misleading commercial. And that's what we don't want to do.
That's right. And let me tell you something on that, by the way. The fact that former Governor Pawlenty is attacking his rival in a primary should give alarm to a lot of folks. It certainly makes me think that Tim Pawlenty is in trouble in this primary. And gone is the day of him just running a rose garden strategy. He's clearly worried, and he's focusing in on the fact that he's spending money to attack Jeff Johnson should tell you something. I don't think it's a shoo-in that Tim Pawlenty is going to win. We have
I don't either.
But let me say this, Alan, because this is important. We cannot snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, but as we tend to do as Democrats, we have a golden opportunity here to keep the governorship. And this is an existential race. If we lose the governorship, it will be the first time in close to 60 years that we've given all three levers of state government, the governor's office, the state Senate and the state House to the Republicans. And we know what that means. All this destructive policy from Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota will be on our doorsteps overnight. So, but what we cannot do is turn inwards and make this about Democratic candidates. We've got to keep the fire on Pawlenty, the fire on Jeff Johnson, and the fire on the Republicans, and don't lose sight of November 6th.
And make sure that the people turn out.
Yes.
That we get that vote out. Knock on those doors. I mean, a difference is, for instance, here in the 2nd Congressional District, we have a candidate running who's just an outstanding individual, Angie Craig. And I think that this is going to be Angie's year, not the stealth candidate who holds the office at the moment. And I say stealth candidate because that's what he has been.
Yes.
And another big challenge is 4 people who have held congressional offices are running for other offices. So that puts an even greater burden on you.
Yeah, look, I mean, before, I think the last time I was here, we didn't have a Senate race, another Senate race on the ballot. We didn't have another congressional race open. We didn't have an open Attorney General's race. So, you know, the 2 safest Democratic seats in Minnesota are now open, which means that we're going to win them. We'll win the Attorney General's race. We've held that seat since 1968. It's the longest held constitutional office. We've got great candidates running. The 5th Congressional District, which is now an open seat, is the 2nd safest Democratic congressional seat in the whole country. So
And
it's
of
not
course,
a question.
the 5th Congressional District is now running one of the candidates for district attorney.
The Attorney General, correct. And
Excuse me, Attorney General.
that's right.
Yes.
So, but the challenge for us is not that I'm worried about losing the Attorney General's office or the 5th District. The challenge for us is you now have 2 safe seats that are open seats, which are drawing a lot of time, money, and energy into those safe seats when we have so much else on the ballot that needs those resources. So it's a very complicated year with primaries, with general election that we have to really navigate all of these different pieces from the Senate races to the congressionals to the governor race and all the way down. So,
And the money that's going to be involved.
Correct.
Not only money raised here, but out-of-state money that's going to pour into this state after the primaries from really corporate interests and other interests that are not really interested in the people of the state of Minnesota, but rather in power.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we have the whole House of Representatives up this year.
Yes.
Good chance, possibly, to take the House back. The Senate is virtually equal at the, the Republicans, I think, have one vote advantage. And there's one Senate race, so we win that one, and it goes the other way.
Yes.
We are losing an outstanding governor. I mean, I can't say enough about the governor, Governor Dayton, who's been here, and we have got to
We've got to win that, and for sure. And Mark's been a great friend, and he asked me, almost 8 years ago now to be the party chair after I helped get him elected, and he's been a great friend and a wonderful partner for our party, and he will be sorely missed, not only for our party but for the state. He has done a tremendous job, and he's leaving a fantastic legacy. But really what's at stake in this governor's race in November is his legacy, because you can rest assured that if the Republicans win this office, they will completely erase everything he's done the last 8 years and everything he's been able to accomplish. But as it pertains to the House, look, one of the positive signs for us over the last year and a half since Donald Trump's inauguration is what's been happening in special elections and elections throughout the country. Of course, people know about the big races in Virginia and New Jersey, of course Alabama, that in Pennsylvania 18 that Democrats are winning across the country. Those are big races getting all the attention, but not getting as much attention is the fact that Democrats have had 43 red to blue legislative flips in deep ruby red Trump districts throughout the country.
Yeah,
Four
all but one. Statistically,
Correct.
it's off the charts.
Right, and 4 flips in the state of Oklahoma. In Wisconsin, we've had 3 flips just in the last year. There's something going on in these local districts, and so in fact, if you averaged it out over the last year and a half since Trump's inauguration, the average swing towards Democrats has been around 14 points, which means for us, there's really no part of this state, no part of this country that we can't compete in if we find good candidates who have a good following and volunteers ready and willing to roll up their sleeves and work hard. And that's the one piece. No one should take for granted this election. And this is the lesson we learned in 16. If we work hard all the way through the polls closing on November 6th, and we leave everything on the field, then we put ourselves in a best position to win. But there's no guarantees we're going to just walk into this election. Sure, there's historical trends. We hear about the party in power. The first midterm is very brutal for the party in power. They lose seats in Congress.
But they've never had a president such as
That's
the one
right.
we have now.
That's correct.
Who is, I can't denigrate him enough, but I mean, the man has no moral compass.
Yes.
He represents everything that you don't want your child to grow up to be. And
That's right. And it's hard, for me as a father of 2 boys, 15 and 13, how do you teach some lessons through this? And there is a lot to teach by looking at what people are doing and using that to say that's not what you want to be. But what's unfortunate is when I grew up, people would look at the president and say, that's what you want to be. You want to be the president, right? You want to be, there's no longer can you look at this president and say that he's a role model for children and others throughout the country. But let me say this, Alan, because I think this is important. We will not win this election if we make this about Donald Trump.
no, I agree
Yeah.
with you. But what's depressing to me, and he's in the background no matter what,
Of course.
is come July 4th. I've always looked forward to July 4th as a day of really great pride in my country. I can't say with this man at the head that there's great pride. When did we ever have a president who had 20,000 people in England protesting him,
Right.
to say nothing of a great balloon that's floating around over London?
Right.
And we can't mention him. We have to talk about the good aspects. And I say we, it's no secret that I am committed on the left, which does not mean that it's always that way, which does not mean that we don't have Republicans
Of course.
on this show who get a fair shake, and some are coming back in not too long, as a matter of fact, but because that's what we're about. But I make no bones about my own personal feelings, especially now,
Yeah.
because I think it's never been more important. I think 2018, in terms of the country, in terms of the state, is a unique and important question or challenge for democracy.
Well, you are absolutely right. And you have been around long enough to understand that silence is complicity. Silence is consent. And we can't be silent about what this president is doing to this country, to our democracy, and frankly, to the world. We have to stand up. But the best way to do that is to fight back at the ballot box.
We have to look at some of those local candidates
Sure.
who have supported him.
Sure.
Lockstep.
That's right.
Running for Congress.
Running for the legislature.
The legislature, et cetera.
But what we've got to do, Alan, you're absolutely right. First off, we've got to take power back from him in 2018. If we don't do that, it makes our jobs very difficult going into 2020 to actually defeat him in that presidential race. So the 2020 race has already begun. And we have to take power back, not just so we can beat Donald Trump in 2020, but that we have a greater check on his power as he continues to try to do destructive things throughout this country, which we've seen manifest itself just in the last month alone with children being taken from their mother's arms at the border. You can go down the list of things that have happened in the last few weeks alone that give all of us great pause for concern. But what we have to do is resist the temptation just to focus on the bad. And we have to offer up the aspirational sort of hope that things can change, that with Democrats in control, people's lives will be better. And so what that requires of us and our candidates is a positive message focused on how we would govern. What are we going to do as Democrats to make
What
our
do we
communities
stand
better?
for?
What do we stand for? And we can't, what we stand for is not just saying we stand against this, we stand against this guy. But here's what we're offering up. Here's our vision for America. Here's
Now,
our
we
vision
think,
for this country.
for instance, that every American should have health insurance.
Of course.
Hello? You don't get that necessarily. We think that an education should be available for everybody who wants it
Yes.
and who wants to go on to higher education. If we could do it and give them a free education, certainly as Bernie Sanders
Yes.
recommended, we would be in favor of that. We are in favor of individuals as opposed to corporations,
Correct.
which are now running the country, and we want to restore that power
That's
to
right.
the people. And I guess power to the people is an old slogan, but it couldn't be more appropriate.
Yeah, we want everyone in this country to be able to have an opportunity to succeed. The American dream is still alive and well in this country. The idea that if you work hard, you play by the rules, that you can leave a better life for your family.
Look
And
what the
everyone should
Supreme
be
Court-
given that opportunity to succeed. And that means that we pay people a living wage so they can actually afford to that American dream. That we allow people to retire with dignity. We allow people to organize collectively at the workplace and bargain for better rights and wages.
That's
That
one of the
we-
things I was
that-
going to say, because the quality of our life is in many ways the responsibility of unions that fought for things
Yes.
that we never had before. And look what the Supreme Court just did to unions. That's another example of, do you want more of that? No, we don't.
Well,
We
this is
wouldn't
the-
have a 40-hour week without unions.
This is
to
the
say-
danger of what's happening right now, and it's much more insidious than just what Donald Trump's doing in the White House. When President Obama tried to appoint members to the courts, not just the Supreme Court, but to the federal judiciary, the Republicans completely obstructed. They didn't allow him to make the appointments he needed during his 8 years as president. And now they're ramrodding these appointments through because they control the Senate. And what's happening is a wholesale change at all levels of our judiciary that are going to have far-reaching impacts for generations. Long after you and I probably are gone, Alan, the impact of the Trump court is going to radically reshape not just the Supreme Court, but the rest of the federal judiciary,
Well, in
radically
particular,
reshape this country.
the circuit courts of appeal.
Of course, absolutely.
And those appointments can still be blocked. The district court cannot be blocked.
That's right.
But that's another reason why we need people in power to be able to take these candidates and assess them fairly.
Elections have consequences, and we need to understand that. And I think there's a number of us, a number of progressives over the years who've been saying, look, don't lose sight of how important these elections are. But I think some people in this country believe that we're never going to repeal Roe v. Wade. We're going to always have reproductive rights and options for women. We're never going to repeal the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts. We're going to always be able to have marriage equality. We're always going to be able to have collective bargaining and unions in this country. And here we see, just in recent weeks, that no.
They're being chipped away
they're
piece by piece
And so
by piece.
I hope young people understand what's at stake, because they grew up in different times. I grew up in a different time than you did. But we both have seen people literally die and fight for many of the rights that we now, in some ways, take for granted. But we have to recommit ourselves to this fight right now. And we have to do everything we can to push back against this Kavanaugh nomination, to push back on other nominations, and to stand up and let people know. You know, right after the election in 2016,
You know, you should be a political leader,
Wait.
because
Well, imagine that. Let me say this,
You
though.
can be pretty inspiring.
Someone said to me after the election in November of 16, Alan, the Republicans are shameless and the Democrats are spineless. And I sat there and I thought about that for a second. And I said, you know what, you're right. We have got
many mistakes.
We've got to grow a spine. We've got to stand up and fight. And you know what? People are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, even if they disagree with you, if they know that you're sincere, you're genuine, and you're standing up and fighting for what you believe in. And Democrats have to stop being so milquetoast on these issues. We've got to be bold. We've got to be willing to fight what we say we're willing to fight for and stand up and do it.
We have to be tolerant.
Sure.
And by that I mean you're not going to find somebody who agrees with you 100%. I'm not going to support this person because of one position here when there are 9 positions that we agree upon.
Yeah.
That was one of the big mistakes we made in 16. And that made us partisan the way the legislature and the way the Congress is now. We can't do that. You're not going to get somebody with 100% agreement.
You can't let perfect be the enemy of good, but you also, if you want someone...
That's a good line. I will use it.
But also, if you want someone who you agree with 100% of the time, then you probably have to run yourself, because you're not ever going to agree with everyone 100% of the time. My friend and mentor, who I loved and still inspires me to this day, Paul Wellstone. There are many things that I disagreed with Paul on. We didn't see eye to eye on everything, but I'll tell you, that helped me as a young organizer understand that you can't be a purist. You can have your own sets of values and what you believe in, and you should fight hard for them. But what we have to remember...
And when you get there, you have the opportunity to fight for them and differ with your peers.
That's correct.
But you've got to get there.
That's right.
And you've got to be in a position to do that. And as I said before, 2018 to me is the most important election in my lifetime.
Yes.
And I first voted for Abraham Lincoln, so I mean,
No,
well,
yes.
maybe not quite.
Yeah.
But,
Well, it is an important election, Alan, and you know you have been through some important elections. I would say this: every election is important. This one, I think most people who are paying attention would say that the consequences of this election are paramount. If we don't win as progressives and as Democrats, it not only will spell a lot of continued bad things happening in this country and around the world, but it will be very difficult to reshape and recalibrate and get this country back on track.
enough damage has been done
That's
in
right.
the last 20 months.
That's right.
And we just can't have that in the future. I can't urge all those people who sat home and sat on their hands, the 102 million who didn't vote. This is your life.
Well,
this is your
that's right.
children's future.
That's right.
This is your grandchildren's future. And if you don't get out there and fight for that future now, then you don't deserve it. Get out there. Get involved. Get active. Become a volunteer.
That's right. Well, what I would encourage folks to do, if they're interested in helping right now fight back against Trump and the Republicans, is to get out and support those local candidates. Visit the DFL website at dfl.org. Put in your address, put in your name, and someone will contact you. All we need is some people, some boots on the ground, people ready to get out there and let people know why this election's important. One person, one vote can make a difference.
Ken Martin, Minnesota DFL chair, an inspiring speaker. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks as always, Alan. Appreciate it.